We've got details on the LA Kings honoring one of the greatest Kings of all time. Plus, is the LA Kings top defensive pair good enough to shut down the top forwards in the Pacific Division? We discuss next on Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. On today's episode of Locked On LA Kings, we've got big news on the Kings honoring Dustin Brown, and we break down the LA Kings top defensive pair of Doughty and Mikey Anderson. My name is Eddie Garcia. I am your host for Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for almost 30 years. For the last 20 plus years, I've been at the Fox Sports Radio Network, where I'm a co-host, sidekick, reporter, and NHL insider. I'm also co-host of the Puck Podcast, a weekly NHL review show that's been putting out content for the past 16 years. And most importantly to you, I am a lifelong LA Kings fan. So big news involving the LA Kings. Earlier today, they announced they're going to retire the number 23 of former Kings captain and forward Dustin Brown. They're also going to unveil a statue of him outside of Crypto.com Arena. And that'll be on February the 11th of 2023. This will be part of a special evening honoring the Kings legendary player. The festivities will include raising the banner with his number to the rafters during an on-ice ceremony to mark the organization's highest individual achievement. Brown's the all-time leader in games played for the Los Angeles Kings, playing in 1,296 career games. He'll be only the seventh Kings player to receive the honor of having his number retired. Can you name the others? Give you a second to think about it. Okay, time's up. He'll be joining former Kings goaltender Rogie Vachon, who wore number 30. Marcel Dion, former Kings legendary forward, who wore 16. Dave Taylor's 18 is in the rafters at Crypto.com Arena. He was kind of a Dustin Brown player in his era. Obviously, the number 99, Wayne Gretzky, the number 20 of Luc Robitaille, and the number 4 of Rob Blake. Now, we know that Blake, the team's current GM, and Robitaille, the team's current president, will be in attendance, but not sure about any of the other players who've had their numbers retired, if they'll be able to make it or not. Now, Brown retired this past May. Of course, I'm sure you well know he captained the Kings' 2 Stanley Cup championship teams in 2012 and 2014. He said about the upcoming honor, quote, "Having my number retired is something I never imagined and is a humbling honor. I'm incredibly proud that I played for the LA Kings my entire career. With my number going to the rafters, I am honored to be amongst the Kings greats, but it makes me think of the 2 banners already in the rafters," talking about the Stanley Cup championship banners, "of which I am most proud. It took numerous people to raise those 2 banners. The same is true for this one. Thank you to all who have helped me achieve my dreams." End quote. Brown also getting a statue outside of the arena as well. He will be the 4th member of the Kings organization and 3rd player to get a statue outside of Crypto.com Arena, joining, of course, Wayne Gretzky and Luc Robitaille, as well as legendary broadcaster Bob Miller, who is a Hockey Hall of Famer as well. Brown, as you probably know, played 18 seasons with the Kings. All of his games played were with the LA Kings. He scored 712 points, 325 goals, 387 assists. Also an NHL record 3,632 career hits. His 1,296 regular season games, again, the most played in a Kings uniform all time. Brown was selected by the Kings in the first round, 13th overall in the 2003 draft as an 18-year-old. So obviously, a very well-deserved honor for Dustin Brown. I'm glad to see that it's coming this soon. Sometimes organizations, for whatever reason, will make players wait several years for this to happen. I'm not sure why it's happening sooner rather than later. I hope it's not a sign that Dustin is considering moving on from Los Angeles, but we'll talk about more about that in a minute. But is Dustin Brown the greatest Kings player of all time? No. But he is one of the greatest Kings of all time. A guy, again, drafted by the team. We really, if you watched his career, you really saw him grow before your eyes from a boy to a man. and becoming, a kid to start his career on some bad teams and then growing into a leadership role, getting the captaincy, and being the first LA King to ever touch the Stanley Cup after winning a championship, raising the cup over his head twice for those two titles. Also, and I talked about this in a previous episode when I was a guest host on this show, but just the class that he showed in the whole situation with him having the captaincy taken away from him and given to Anze Kopitar. Clearly, I think that really bothered Dustin Brown, as I think it would bother any player. I mean, he really did nothing to deserve that being taken away. I think the Kings just felt like Anze Kopitar is, one of the greatest players to play for the LA Kings. He's hopefully going to do his entire career in a Kings uniform as well. He's such I don't know, he's a flashier player, I guess. He is the Kings' best player, has been for many years. You could certainly make an argument, I guess, for Drew Doughty and Jonathan Quick, but I don't know. I guess they just felt that Kopitar is a little bit more outgoing than Dustin Brown. I guess I really, honestly, I still don't know to this day why the Kings decided to do that. But like I said, it is to Dustin Brown's credit, the class that he handled that situation, and also a credit to the friendship that Dustin Brown and Anze Kopitar had, that they didn't turn it into something that could be divisive within the locker room, that, teammates had to pick sides about who they thought really should be the captain, things like that. So, Dustin Brown, he may not have worn the C on his jersey for his entire career with the Kings, but he was certainly one of the leaders of the Kings. No question about that. Always has been one of my favorite players. I always appreciate those guys that can put the puck in the net and also have a physical edge to their game as well. I always thought, and maybe I'm being too much of a Kings fan here, I always thought Dustin Brown's reputation as a dirty-ish player was never well deserved. Was he involved in some borderline hits throughout his career? Sure, but when you throw over 3,000 hits in your career, occasionally some of them are going to be on the line or over the line. But I never felt that Dustin Brown was any kind of a player who took dirty, retaliatory, unnecessary shots on players. Maybe I'm just wearing my Kings colors a little bit too much there. But I always thought that was not deserved. I really didn't. And I thought Dustin Brown was a hard, honest, clean player, a guy who did have enough talent to put the puck in the net numerous times, scored some big goals throughout his career. And like I said, always going to be remembered as the original captain of the two Stanley Cup winning teams. The honor of having his jersey retired is a no-brainer. As for the statues, and this is kind of funny, I'm part of a radio show called The Ben Maller Show. If you listen to local radio here in Los Angeles, it's on AM 570 LA Sports, 11 p.m. to 3 a.m. And, it's funny. Sports fans have different ideas about honors and things like that. And Ben Maller, the host of the show that I work on, one of the shows, he thinks that jersey numbers should never be retired. He says it's okay to have like a ring of honor where a name is kind of up in a stadium or an arena, but he thinks it's stupid to retire numbers. I, on the other hand, am totally fine with a ring of honor or retiring numbers, but I think the statue thing is a little hokey. I think statues should be reserved for, real like legends of the game, like the all-time greats, maybe a player who unfortunately had a big impact but passed away before his time. Something like that. I don't know. I'm not real big on the statues. And we have so many of these statues outside of Crypto.com Arena. If you are in Los Angeles and you go to any games, there's a bunch of Lakers statues, and some of the guys never play a game inside Crypto.com Arena. Jerry West and I think Elgin Baylor has a statue. They never played in Crypto.com. There's a Oscar De La Hoya statue out there. I think he had one career fight in the former Staples Center. So is it just an LA honor? If so, why aren't there any USC football players or UCLA basketball players out there? So, I don't know. I'm happy for Dustin Brown. One of my buddies, Doug Stolhand, who's a co-host for me on the Puck podcast, he's a Ducks fan. He had a bit of a smart-ass comment, but actually it is accurate. So if you're going to have a Dustin Brown statue, that means you're going to have an Anze Kopitar, Drew Doughty, and Jonathan Quick statue, right? that's fair. I mean, those guys are going to be, when it's all said and done, they're going to have their numbers in the rafters. I have no doubt about that. They're all-time Kings legends. So, I mean, at some point, how many statues is too many statues outside of the arena? Or where are we going to start putting these things? But anyway, that's me. I'm not big on the statues. I love the jersey retirement. I will absolutely be there in Crypto.com arena. Again, the date is going to be on February 11th of 2023. So mark your calendars now, Kings fan. I didn't look. I apologize to see who the opponent was on that night. But really looking forward to seeing Dustin Brown being honored. And I hope he continues to be a part of the organization. I don't know if that's what he wants. I know his wife has been working behind the scenes with the LA Kings. I think she's still doing kind of in a community relations type of a role. I think Dustin would be great in that kind of a role, or whatever role he wants. If he wants to get into scouting, if he wants to get into coaching, whatever. I think he would be great with that. I think it would be great to have the guy who played the most games in his career in a Kings uniform continue to be part of the organization. And we have seen the Kings do this with former players. I mean, I was at the development camp recently, and some of the assistant coaches helping run that. You had Matt Green, Jared Stoll. I think Mike Donnelly was there. Sean O'Donnell was there. And obviously we know within the top levels of the organization, you've got Luke Robitaille and Rob Blake running the team. Former Kings legends have their numbers retired in the rafters. So the Kings have shown, and some could argue it's some sort of like nepotism, that they're hiring their buddies or whatever. But I mean, I think Luke Robitaille and Rob Blake have certainly proven that they are have done a great job in their positions to this point, and they are well deserving of those positions. And I kind of like the idea of the family type of feel for the LA Kings of hiring former Kings into positions. And I don't know, I like the feel of that. I'm not for just giving guys jobs just because they played for the Kings, but if they're deserving, if they have a desire and a work ethic, then I like having former Kings be a part of the organization. It just feels more like a family in a way. And like I said, I don't know what Dustin Brown's plans are. I think he plans on staying in the area because, as the joke goes, he has all those kids. And I'm sure, I don't think any of them are in high school yet, but they might be close, junior high, elementary school age. They all play, I'm sure, youth hockey here locally. And so I think because of his kids' roots in the community, that might go a long way in Dustin Brown staying in Southern California and hopefully becoming a part of the Kings organization. Hey, if you wanted to place a wager on the LA Kings to win the Stanley Cup next season, betonline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your betting needs. Find all your favorite sports and events at the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games. Find reviews and news of every league, including Major League Baseball, combat sports, esports, and even golf. Head to BetOnline or use your mobile device to learn more about the action happening today. BetOnline, where the game starts. Now, over the last week or so, I've looked at the LA Kings forwards and what possible spots could be available up front. Now it's time to look at the LA Kings back end and break down the LA Kings projected defense. We're going to start with the Kings' expected top pairing of Drew Doughty and Mikey Anderson. Drew Doughty will be heading into his 15th season, all with the LA Kings after being selected number 2 overall in 2008 draft. As I mentioned, his number 8 will be in the rafters of the arena at some point when he hangs it up, which is not going to be for a little while. But Drew, along with Andrei Kopitar and Jonathan Quick, are now the only remaining players left on the team from the 2 Stanley Cup winning teams, obviously following the retirement of Dustin Brown. As for Drew, he's played in 1,014 career games with the Kings, 132 goals and 435 assists. And the question is, he's still signed for several years, but what does Drew Doughty have left in the tank? And I think he's got plenty left in the tank. Drew Doughty, for whatever reason, has gotten this reputation around the hockey world of being a guy whose reputation is bigger than his play, and I don't see that. I think Drew Doughty still is an elite level defenseman. Maybe not a guy who's going to be a Norris Trophy finalist year in and year out, a former Norris Trophy winner, of course, but he still has a lot of game left. He's still clearly the Kings' best defenseman. He's still going to be running the Kings' #1 power play unit. He still is a guy who makes great decisions, still has a bit of offensive side to his game, but is still very responsible defensively, getting in passing lanes, using his stick effectively. And I think Drew is been energized by what's going on with the Kings. He was very outspoken a couple seasons ago about wanting to get this team back in the playoffs. That missing out on the playoffs wasn't acceptable, and he was not happy, and he shouldn't have been. But now that the Kings are clearly on an upward trajectory, I think Drew Doughty's been energized by this. I mean, I know it was really bittersweet for him to see the Kings make the playoffs and him to be hurt last season with the wrist injury and miss a good chunk of games. Matter of fact, 39 games last year for Drew. He had 7 goals and 24 assists, but missed a number of games down the stretch, a bulk of games down the stretch because of that wrist injury. But it was really encouraging to see he was still around the team. He was still being a leader. He was encouraging his teammates. And if you recall, after Game 5 of the playoff series against Edmonton, when Adrian Kempe scored that overtime game winner, Drew Doughty was in the hallway waiting for Adrian Kempe to give him a big hug. And he was so excited about that win. I think he's going to be energized by this. I think he's so excited to be able to hopefully play in meaningful games going down the stretch and getting into the playoffs and going on another Stanley Cup run. So I still think Drew Doughty, again, has plenty left in the tank, still the number one defenseman on this team, and will be on that top pairing, along with, we assume, Mikey Anderson, who is still yet to be signed. He's still a restricted free agent. He's got that qualifying offer. That's going to get done. The Kings have talked about how they're going to make that happen some way, somehow. So Mikey Anderson's slated to be on that top pairing. He's 23 years old, was a 4th-round pick of the Kings in 2017, and he has turned into a very solid defensive defenseman. He's never going to wow you with offense, but maybe he can chip in a little bit more on the offensive side going forward in his career. 4 goals and 16 assists in 117 career games, all with the Kings. I talked about it on an earlier episode, but I thought Mikey Anderson proved a lot to himself and probably Kings fans as well with his performance against Connor McDavid in that playoff series. Now, did he shut down Connor McDavid? Of course not. Is anyone in the NHL going to shut down Connor McDavid? No. Maybe for a game if you're lucky. But, I mean, Connor McDavid played the best hockey of his career in that playoff series against the Kings. But Mikey Anderson, there were lots of times that he had the assignment of going head-to-head against the former MVP, and I thought he held his own pretty well. Again, you can't shut down someone like that, but you can make him work for everything that he gets on the ice. And I thought when Mikey was paired up against him, that he did a very respectable job against that. I think he can gain confidence off of that performance. I think he knows in his own mind, look, if I can go up against Connor McDavid and hold my own, I can go up against anybody in the NHL and hold my own. So I was encouraged by that performance. Again, I mean, you might be saying, what are you talking about? Connor McDavid was amazing in that series. He was. But when Mikey Anderson went head-to-head with him, again, I'll use that term, he held his own. And if you can hold your own against Connor McDavid, then you can hold your own against anybody. So I do like the pairing, the top pairing of Drew Doughty and Mikey Anderson for the LA Kings. The question is, where do they rank in the Pacific Division as far as the top defensive pairs? And I don't have any analytic statistics to share with you on that, but I think just kind of eyeballing it, I think that they are amongst the best defensive pairings in the Pacific Division. Now, granted, there's not a ton of, you've got Alex Pietrangelo in Vegas and whoever he's playing with. Calgary has a nice defensive top pairing, not going to wow you, but solid. And I think Drew Doughty and Mikey Anderson fit well in there as far as what their roles are. So whether they're the best or not, I don't know, but I think they're in the conversation. I think Drew Doughty and Mikey Anderson are in the conversation for being one of the top defensive pairs in the Pacific Division. And they will be called on to anchor the Kings in a lot of ways as far as on the defensive side of things coming up this season. Again, fingers crossed Drew Doughty stays healthy, because losing him and not having him for the end of the regular season and in the playoffs certainly hurt the power play and hurt the Kings overall defensively. So we're going to talk more about the Kings defensive core going forward coming up the rest of the week. Just a reminder that Locked On NHL podcast has you covered for all of your league-wide NHL talk, with a rotating cast of local hosts from the Locked On NHL channel, breaking down the biggest stories in hockey 5 days a week. Subscribe for free on your favorite podcast app or on YouTube. Again, that is Locked On NHL. Did want to give a quick YouTube update as we close out this episode. If you watched the first episode I did on YouTube, thank you very much. It is a work in progress. There are some things about it I would like to do better both from a performance standpoint and also from a video and audio quality standpoint. But those are things that are going to be worked on down the road. Doing this also will give the opportunity to have interviews on this show, which I definitely want to do going forward, but I need to work out the logistics of how all that works. So again, thank you for watching. If you are watching on YouTube, it is a work in progress. If you're a big YouTube fan, and I am as well, just kind of hang in there. We're going through a little bit of a rough patch to start things off, but like I said, I'm learning the ins and outs of doing video. I'm an old radio guy, so the audio part of it comes easy to me, but the video side of things, using different graphics, having people come in and incorporate them in interviews, all that stuff. There'll be a learning process with that for me. But going forward, I'm really excited about doing it. I'm excited about learning something new, being on this side of things with the video. And so if you are a YouTube watcher, then hopefully those things will improve sooner rather than later. Coming up on Wednesday's show, we're going to update you on any LA Kings news that obviously takes place. We're still waiting for the contracts for Mikey Anderson and Sean Durzi. We're going to continue to break down the LA Kings defensive core. And I'll tell you how you can watch some recently drafted LA Kings players and some big prospects for the LA Kings on the ice coming up very soon. To keep up to date with this show and what's going on with the LA Kings, please follow us on Twitter. We are at Locked On LA Kings. I know I have, if you're watching on YouTube, I have my personal Twitter account on the logo here. If you want to follow me there too, that's perfectly fine. But if you want to specifically follow what's going on with this channel, again, it is at Locked On LA Kings. If you would like to send me an email with any comments or thoughts on the Kings or this show or anything else, the email address is lockedoneddie@gmail.com, EDDIE, lockedoneddie@gmail.com. Again, I've been talking about this. Want to have a regular email feedback portion of the show going forward, but obviously to have that, I need your input, your feedback as well. So again, lockedoneddie@gmail.com is the email address if you want to make any comments on anything that's going on with this show. Hey, thank you so much for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. Now make your second listen Locked On NHL. Locked On Experts give you a daily 30-minute podcast of all things NHL all year long. Stay up to date on everything in hockey. Locked On NHL, your daily 30-minute NHL podcast. Again, thank you so much for listening and watching Locked On LA Kings. I'm Eddie Garcia. Go Kings, go.